What is neuroinflammation? So this is an inflammatory reaction in the brain, or it can happen in the spinal cord as well. That's your body's protective mechanism. But if those stay in the brain too long and we don't clear those out, that's going to cause downstream long-term neuroinflammation. If someone just has some cognitive decline happening, we can utilize Semax to help with that, reducing the inflammation levels. And Selank, and it reduces more that stress-induced inflammation. Reading, puzzles, anything complex where you're utilizing your brain, those can all be really, really helpful to just help stimulate better neuroplasticity. Something to mix in with your coffee is L-theanine. It kind of clears the adenosine receptors, which if you have any caffeine or say you drink some coffee, you almost feel more jittery, or caffeine just doesn't sit well with you, could be due to L-theanine deficiency. Welcome everybody to the Unreasonable Health Podcast and the Health Accelerator Challenges. This is your host tonight, Cade Archibald. Today, we are launching our Ageless Brain 5-part series. And so we're going to be diving into some really interesting facts and specifics around the brain, as well as talk about what can cause neurodegeneration and some of these neuro problems. And then we'll jump into some different ways that we can test and create some challenges around enhancing and increasing your cognitive abilities and your brain performance. Because we can have our bodies as healthy as possible, but if we don't have our brains, it may not be as enjoyable. We'll put it that way. This is week 1 of the Ageless Brain 5-part series. We're going to start off by understanding the aging brain. So what's causing some of the neuroinflammation? We'll talk about kind of what is neuroinflammation. And it really combines some neuroscience as well as some practical interventions with some really cool tools like peptides, stem cells, our plasma renewal, and then we'll get into some testing around it's called NeuroCatch. This is a new test we're implementing. We'll have the device and set up at East West Health Center there in Salt Lake City area. So if you're interested in doing this NeuroCatch screening, definitely encourage you guys to come out and check it out, because this is something that can show. We'll go through some of the results. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So we're going to talk. So kind of the topic today, neuroinflammation, what's causing it, and what it is. We'll go into some different peptides that can help with that and help with neuroplasticity. We'll talk about neuroplasticity and nootropics. Love different nootropics. There's some really cool things around nootropics that we'll jump into, and then what foods and lifestyle things will hurt the brain, as well as where we can focus energy. And then we'll do a little intro to the NeuroCatch, and you'll get some really cool challenges. So let's dive in, and I'm going to open up the chat box here. Make sure anyone may make a comment. Let me know how your last week was, and let's dive in. All right. So what is neuroinflammation? So this is an inflammatory reaction in the brain, or it can happen in the spinal cord as well. It's driven by the production of either cytokines, which those are typically cytokines or inflammatory signaling factors, chemokines. Similarly, they signal when there's problems, damage, any external sources that are creating, or it can be internal where there's damage. Reactive oxygen species. So this is like infections or oxidative stress, different chemicals that we get exposed to, pollutions that we breathe into. All of those things can impact and cause neuroinflammation. And there's other messengers as well. So the severity of neuroinflammation is really based on what triggered it. So like traumatic brain injuries, when you get a really bad TBI or traumatic brain injury, that's going to increase your cytokines and chemokines. That's your body's protective mechanism. But if those stay in the brain too long and we don't clear those out, that's going to cause downstream long-term neuroinflammation. Depending on how long you have those different things in the body will determine how severe the neuroinflammation and the damage is. And so what is so stress? That's one of the things that can put your brain in a rough spot. So definitely pay attention to how your stress levels are, what your stress resilience levels, how stress resilient you are as well. Those are really key things. So stress increases pro-inflammatory cytokine production, which, obviously is going to fuel neuroinflammation. It also worsens with depression, anxiety, or other mental health disorders. And so that's going to cause more and more neuroinflammation in the brain. So, and one thing to think about here, so neuroinflammation has a protective role in defending the brain from harmful agents and assisting in tissue repair. So like those cytokines and chemokines, those are good. Like after a traumatic injury, they'll actually pull your body's, stem cells, immune function to help with tissue repair. But where it becomes a problem, if that's prolonged and it's excessive. So if we don't get proper repair and you just have these lingering cytokines and chemokines, that is going to cause some long-term negative effects. And so those are things to really make sure you resolve when there is an injury or a problem, as well as just pay attention to the stress levels that you're under, and you can get some testing. So we start with our initial blood work to figure out, is there potentially some inflammation happening? And then you can look at, and then get deeper with additional testing that I'll cover here. Some other factors like genetic mutations, protein accumulation or aggregation, infections, trauma, even drugs can trigger long-term sustained neuroinflammation. And so in turn, that hinders your body's regenerative abilities. And so that's going to contribute to that neurodegenerative disease. So, there's studies that consistently link neuroinflammation with cognitive decline, and cognitive decline typically leads to Alzheimer's diseases or strokes, some of these other neurodegenerative disorders. Interesting fact here, post-stroke cognitive impairments associated with inflammation in up to 75% of patients at 6 months. And there's, that model is also demonstrated prolonged neuroinflammation leads to persistent cognitive impairments as well. And so, long-term neuroinflammation essentially is going to cause some problems. Here's some reference studies. If you're interested, there's a Harvard medicine study on inflammation and brain health, as well as out of the JHA, infection, inflammation, post-stroke cognitive impairment. It's another one that's at the AHA, JHAjournals.org, a site, as well as the Frontiers study. So neuroinflammation and cognitive impairment. So let's talk a little bit about peptides and their function with neuroinflammation. So, there's specific peptides that naturally occur in our body, as well as you can get them, externally through injectables, orals, nasal sprays, things like that. But these peptides have anti-inflammatory properties that can reduce that inflammation and help protect the brain from that long-term damage. One of the most interesting things, and I'm sure you've heard Reagan and I talk about it, but this first initially started in Russia, and I wish that the US would adopt this protocol, but Cemax, they'll actually use that peptide specifically. If someone comes in with a traumatic brain injury, that's one of the first things that they'll give their patients is Cemax. Super powerful peptide, and we'll talk about this in just a second in a little more detail. But some of the potential benefits of systemic peptide treatments in brain health: cognitive improvements, enhancing focus, memory, problem-solving skills. It adds some neuroprotection. And so it can protect against degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. It can even help with memory enhancement, so boosting ability to learn and retention. So all really, really good stuff. The two main peptides that we'll utilize when it comes to neuroinflammation is Cemax, as I mentioned before. This increases your BDNF levels. That's the brain-derived nootropic factor. And this improves cognitive function, memory, and mood while reducing inflammation. And so it can, really helpful like traumatic brain injuries, or if someone just has some cognitive decline happening, we can utilize Cemax to help with that, reducing the inflammation levels. Along with that, Selank. And Selank's, very anti-inflammatory. It also supports the cognitive functions, and it reduces more of that stress-induced inflammation. One thing Selank's been, kind of utilized for in, depression, anxiety, really feeling down and out. Selank helps it assists with that stress or more a negative mental cognitive functions and issues there. And so especially if you're we want to address some of the HPA axis issues if you're dealing with a lot of stress and your stress resilience levels are low. So that's where like epitalin can be helpful with that adrenal function. But then Selank's going to help lower the neuroinflammation more specifically. And so that can be super helpful when dealing with some of these cognitive issues and neuroinflammation. It's going to promote neuroplasticity. So, talking a little bit about neuroplasticity, this is a process that it's the adaptive structural and functional balances of the brain. And so, this is your nervous system's ability to change its activity in response to different intrinsic as well as extrinsic activities and different stimuli. And so that, you can utilize neuroplasticity to essentially rewire the brain. And so, this is where there's some really intriguing things on how you can do this. There's different games and thinking structures that you can do, quizzes, things that keep your mind active, even, reading, puzzles, anything complex where you're utilizing your brain. Those can all be really, really helpful to just, help stimulate better neuroplasticity. And so there's, we use peptides to influence brain plasticity, as well as having plasticity is critical for learning, memory, and recovering from injuries like those TBIs, as we talked about. And then some of those peptides can help with stimulating neurogenesis and the creation of new neurons. The other thing not mentioned on the slide would be stem cells. And that's where we've had just amazing outcomes with our brain rejuvenation procedures and treatments with stem cells and other and utilizing that with peptides, because ultimately what that's doing is and we've seen it time and time again where we'll see homocysteine levels really decrease. And if you're looking at your labs and you're seeing elevated levels of homocysteine, we find that elevated in traumatic brain injuries, anyone with a lot of neuroinflammation. That homocysteine is kind of a systemic inflammatory marker, but definitely seen it hugely impacted in the brain with brain inflammation. So pay attention in your labs. Always make sure your homocysteines in check, because if that's elevated for extended amount of time, you're going to create more and more neurodegeneration, and because that neuroinflammation is leading to that. And so we definitely want to address that as soon as possible. There's also nootropics can be very helpful in neuroplasticity. So some of the different nootropics that are very easily and readily available, and I'm sure you've heard of, like ginkgo biloba, and that helps with cognitive function, memory, enhances blood flow to the brain. So it's also has been shown to maybe help with symptoms like mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease. Another one, rhodiola rosacea, and that helps fight mental fatigue, promotes peak mental performance, and it can also help with that stress resilience and mental clarity. Also, a ginseng can be a really, really helpful one. May have some neuroprotective properties, reduces stress and fatigue. Some other ones, L-theanine. So L-theanine's an amino acid this is one that I would have L-theanine in kind of your normal stack of everyday things. If you're taking like caffeine, for example, something to mix in with your coffee is L-theanine. It will help with some really just kind of clears the adenosine receptors, which that's where if you notice if you have any caffeine, or say you drink some coffee, you almost feel more jittery, or caffeine just doesn't sit well with you, could be due to L-theanine deficiency, and that can really help. It's great to take L-theanine in the evenings. It does kind of lower the nervous system load, and so great for promoting relaxation, enhances sleep quality. It's a great amino acid to utilize. Acetylcholine is also another great one for focus and information processing, improves that working memory, and supports overall cognitive function. And then lion's mane. This is a mushroom, and a lion's mane, great for nerve and neurological health. They've been shown to potentially help with antidepressants and anxiety. It has some anxiolytic properties. Sorry, my enunciation's a little off today. And it also supports overall brain health. But yeah, lion's mane, great, neuroplasticity, nootropic or mushroom. Some additional ones. So green tea naturally contains L-theanine and caffeine. So this a very great extract, just a natural nootropic, improves attention, reaction time, promotes relaxation, and reduces anxiety. And then ashwagandha, another great adaptogenic herb. So this supports cognitive function, reduces stress, anxiety, has adaptogenic properties. Interesting thing. So we have our adrenal reset compound, or our customized formula. It has ashwagandha, it has L-theanine, a few other properties to help support your adrenals. But really, it's amazing at really just helping a lot of adaptogens in there to help with your cortisol spikes, reducing those. And cortisol, that's your stress hormone. So if you think about where you want your stress levels to be, or is like your cortisol levels, they should be exactly inverse to melatonin. So melatonin's that sleep hormone. And at night, you want that creeping way up. You want your cortisol levels way down. Because if you're amped up and you're all stressed out, excuse me, in the evening, coming down, sleep's going to be rough. But also that's creating a lot of excess stress, which that's going to create more neuroinflammation. Whereas if you have your adrenal function, or your cortisol levels are nice and mellow, so they should be peaked out in the mornings, and then they gradually reduce throughout the day. And that's where melatonin is going to be kind of coming up gradually. And then at night, when it's time to go to bed, you're going to be peak on the melatonin, low on the cortisol levels. And then gradually overnight, they're going to switch. Let's see. Had a question come in. What is that called that you mentioned that has ashwagandha in it? Oh, it's the adrenal reset pack. So we've we've customized our own nutritional formulas. So there's some really cool stuff there. So you can reach out to the office to learn a little bit more about that there. All right, so let's talk diet and lifestyle. So what contributes the most to neuroinflammation in the kind of daily lives? So your diet, any trans fats, ultra processed foods, fried foods, sugar, excess sugar will really create this refined carbs and low omega-3 intake. So like omega-3 critical for brain health. So if you're eating a lot of foods with like omega-6 fatty acids, things like that, processed meat. So you see some of the images here, bread, cereals, pastas, anything that takes a lot of different ingredients to create, those are all going to be, very inflammatory and neuroinflammatory. And so where to focus your energy would be on real foods. So, good proteins from grass-fed, organically raised, proteins. So like cows, beef can be great, really clean sources of chicken, lamb, those are all going to be helpful, as well as, real foods, beets, some of your nice greens, veggies, and fruits too. Blueberries, raspberries, some of those things. Those can all be helpful. Don't overdo it on the fruits and veggies. Make sure you get, the appropriate amount of your macros as far as your protein intake goes versus your carbs. And if you're getting them from real food sources, as opposed to, the other thing would be is look at the oils that you're taking in. So like vegetable oils, canola oils, soy, sunflower seed oil, all those can be extremely inflammatory versus like your olive oil and, grass-fed butter. Those are going to be a lot more helpful than a lot of those different refined oils. More and more is coming out that they're wreaking havoc, not just on our brains, but like our whole body and our body's ability to process foods appropriately and control blood sugar. And so, it's so common that I'll get, I'll look at like, say, a protein bar. I'm guilty as charged. I'm not promoting everybody go, take protein bars, but there's some times where I'm on the road and I got to find a source of protein, and I'll look at the labels as I'm in the store, and there's so many times where there's a lot of soy protein out there, which that can be very estrogenic. That's going to cause a lot of just, you start holding on to excess toxins when you have elevated estrogen levels. And so want to watch out for that. And then also those oils. It's so often we'll see, soybean, canola oil, vegetable oils added into these proteins to make them sticky. And it's just not a good recipe for health. And so, watch out for those, as well as like your fried foods things. So lifestyle wise, some things that are going to create and cause neuroinflammation, chronic stress, lack of physical activity. So, just sitting at your desk all day, not moving much, not moving from there, that's going to cause some definitely problems. Get out and exercise. That's probably one of the easiest, most accessible ways to increase your BDNF levels is get some high intensity exercise and physical activity. That causes some short-term inflammation that then your body can repair and recover and really create some long-term resilience. Excess alcohol consumption, smoking, and sleep deprivation. You want to create a neuroinflammatory recipe. Don't sleep for a while, and man, your ability to thought process, problem solve, all those things that are ultimately symptoms of neuroinflammation. Those are all going to skyrocket with sleep deprivation. So the inverse of that is, have some really good ways that you're impacting your stress levels or creating more stress resilience. Oh, thank you, Gary. NAD plus, really, really helpful. with neuroinflammation is, that's helping with your mitochondria. And so that's going to overall help with brain health, and you get healthy mitochondria, and that helps clear out a lot of the junk in the cells in the body. So yes, and we have a neuro NAD spray that we'll utilize. So it's a nasal spray, and that can be super helpful. Thanks for bringing that up. All right. So what are some ways that you can test for a overall neuro function? And this is where Reagan and I have been researching this heavily and finding the best possible platform to create the best brain protocol for us. And so, as the goal here would be to start getting everybody involved in these tests so we can get more information and data on our different neuro regeneration protocols, and also just be able to measure how well your cognitive function is. So the NeuroCatch, it's a platform advanced medical technology designed to quickly and accurately assess the brain's function. And so it's designed to help evaluate cognitive brain function, can acquire some objective neurophysiological measures on the cognitive processing, as well as optimize the brain health and achieve maximum overall performance. So here's some of what the results look like. So we'll look at the auditory sensory system, basic attention, and cognitive processing. And so we can get some befores. If you've already done some of our neuro rejuvenation procedures and treatment, it's still a great place to get some insights. And then we can track this and see, okay, how well are you functioning and progressing with your cognitive function. So lastly here, so this is your week 1 challenge for your Ageless Brain. So week 1, I want you guys to do one game or activity that increases neuroplasticity. So besides your exercise, hopefully you guys are really good on your exercise side of things, because that's going to increase neuroplasticity. But think about some different brain games. There's different video games, like, don't get sucked down the rabbit hole of gaming all night, but the dexterity of you're moving your thumbs and having to process what's going on, and that can help enhance neuroplasticity. Puzzles, just putting together a complex puzzle be really helpful. Rhythm gaming. So this an example of this would be like, I think it's Just Dance or something where you have to move your body and match certain things, and that can be to music. Is usually like, that's what I think it's called Just Dance, and you're literally like following the screen to do certain things. Do an escape room. That's great for neuroplasticity. Learn a new language, or you could learn the guitar or a musical instrument. I've actually, beginning this year, started learning how to play the guitar. That's been a fun experience. I'm still not that great, but I'll get there. And then so that goes along with creating music or art, like painting, drawing. Those things can be super. So there's kind of 2 factors. It can be really relaxing and help reduce that adrenal and that stress response, as well as very neuro regenerating. So hopefully you guys are excited about your challenge this week. And I appreciate you, those that tuned in live. Thank you so much for joining us. Those watching this recording, hopefully you found some great value here, and appreciate you. Hopefully my goal would be, as you guys shared this episode with any family members, loved ones, friends that you believe could benefit from some additional brain health. So pass it on, share it, and we will see you guys next week on the Health Accelerator Challenges. And have an amazing week, everybody. We'll see you.